I'm Trish from A Touch of Magic, and today I'm going to show you how to make Tipsy cake, or even Russian log, as some of you may know this delicious cake. It is typically Irish and it is absolutely gorgeous. We have got 350 grams of each of these ingredients. We've self-raising flour. We have got, again, 350 grams of caster sugar. We have got 6 beautiful free-range eggs, equivalent to 350 grams of eggs. We have got 350 grams of softened butter, and to throw in a little extra flavour, I have half a teaspoon of almond extract. Those are the ingredients we are starting with. Now the tin I've got 2 tins. I've got one behind me, ready, lined. When you're measuring a tin, whip it over, Trish's tip, I measure from the base of your tin. So this tin is 12 inches by 8 inches. I'm looking for 2 tins. It'll give a lovely layer, thin layer of sponge for this particular Russian log. So when you're measuring your tins, measure from the base. Don't measure from the top, or you'll end up with the wrong size tin. Now I've added my softened butter and my caster sugar into my mixer, and they go on first. I just want the butter and sugar mixed. They're not overly mixed, but just enough so that they combine. Now this is softened butter, that's important, room temp. So if you were to put your thumb and squidge the butter, you should have that lovely soft indentation of your thumbprint on your butter. Now as you can see, this is lovely. It's coming together. You've got your butter and your sugar softened, and it has a lovely pliable mixture. Now this is the crazy bit. I'm adding my flour next. Turn it down a little bit, because what I don't want, don't put your speed on your mixer to very high, because what I don't want is to activate the gluten in the flour, because you'll end up with a tough cake. So my flour goes in first, and this helps prevent curdling, and in plop my delicious eggs. And as you can see, they are deliciously golden. Plop, plop, plop. Give that a minute. As I mentioned, do not overbeat it. While that's still mixing, I'm just going to add our almond extract into the sponge mix. Now I'm stopping it just because it's nearly mixed, but what I don't want are any lumps and bumps. So again, scrape down the bowl. Oh, the smell of almond coming through is absolutely delicious. Now this may not be traditional in the Russian log, but I love adding it because it just gives another added flavor, layer of flavor to the cake. We're nearly there. As you can see, my batter has not curdled. And that is our mix done. I've evenly split the batter between the 2 tins. So it roughly works around 600, 650 of batter per tin. Now you will need to weigh the batter. You can try and eye it, but what you don't want is you don't want one base thicker than the other. So I just find using a cranked palette knife, I'm just getting into the nooks and crannies and making sure the batter is evenly spread in the tins, ready for the oven. So again, all I'm doing is making sure that lovely sponge is evenly spread, so I have a nice even bake when it goes into the oven. Here we have our 2 trays full of our batter. It's going into a preheated oven, 180 degrees Celsius, which is 350 degrees Fahrenheit, for about 20-25 minutes. Just keep an eye on them. They will be beautifully risen, not too high, but just enough to give us a fantastic even layer for our Russian slices. Now, for Russian log or Tipsy cake, I have got cake crumbs. Now you can specifically make cake, but what I tend to do is I create a cake for celebration or whatever the case may be, and whatever trimmings I have left over I can either use for cake pops, or I'll use it for my Russian log or a Tipsy cake. I will put them into the freezer, and then I build up enough to make the Tipsy cake. So I have got 1 kg of cake crumb, and in it goes. As you can see, you could put red velvet, you could put chocolate cake, you could put anything that you fancy. So I have got 1 kg of cake crumb. In that goes. Now I am going to turn it on, just so that the mixer can break it down even more, because I do want this to turn into a cake putty. About, okay, about that. Now, while that's mixing away nice, and so I'll turn it up just another little bit, sorry, because I want to break it up. In a bowl, I have got raspberry jam. Now for the purists, you could use Seedless jam. I like the flavour of this particular jam because it's nice. It has a very high ratio of fruit to sugar, so there's a lovely punch of raspberry through that. Before I add it, I'm going to add 50 mils of your favourite tipple. Now this could be whiskey, it could be brandy, and I'm just going to break it up with a palette knife. It's not going to make any difference because it's going to be mixed in with the cake crumb anyway. Just give it a stir, stir, stir. Oh lads, the smell of this. Now you can go as far as 100 mils, but I just find 100 mils for me, it's a preference in relation to taste. I think it's a bit too strong, and in that goes. So this is literally your binding agent for your Russian log. Think of it as your cake putty. Get every last bit out of the container. Nothing left for Mr. Manners. In it goes. Now you can see it is blending, and it is continuing to blend. I do not want to have a crumb that's a little sticky. I want this almost to become like a cake pop consistency. So it's almost like cake dough. And if I stop the machine, oh, the smell. Don't want it going everywhere. So if I squeeze that with my hands, you have got perfect pliable cake dough. And that is the filling for our Russian Tipsy loaf. Stay tuned. Now look at these beauties out of the oven, and they have a gorgeous boing, spring sprung. These are used for the base for our Russian log. I've washed the tin, relined the apartment, not even the apartment, the parchment. Oh my God, can you reline an apartment? No. It's parchment in the tin. So we're going to use our beautiful sponges, layer up the deliciousness, and add to the craziness that is the Russian log. How do I get my sponge into the tin without it cracking? A little tip. So we get the parchment paper. We will cover the sponge because we want to have an even layer of our parchment. We don't want it poking out anywhere. You get your tin, cover the sponge, turn it upside down, boom! You've got your sponge in your tin without any cracks. Now for the filling, I've got about 100 grams, give or take, of raspberry jam. And all I'm going to do is, this is a thin layer. It's just keeping our filling in place. As you can see, it looks like as if I'm a miser. I don't want too much of that jam. It's only adding another layer of flavor. It is not part of the whole experience of your Russian log. Get all the nooks and crannies. Give or take, as I mentioned, about 100 grams of raspberry jam. Don't worry if it's scrimping on your raspberry jam. As I said, I just want a really thin layer before we put on our filling. Now this is the fun bit. This is where we get our edible putty and put it on top. Now it doesn't look much like a Russian log at the moment, but I can tell you from the delicious smell of the alcohol along with our fruit, it's basically almost, as I mentioned, like a cake pop mixture. Now for those are going to be asking, why aren't I wearing gloves? I wash my hands continuously, and it's the only really way I can feel the consistency and the depth and feeling if, as they say, one side thick and the other side thin, and I am pushing it down. So the whole thing about your Russian log is you compress the mixture So much so, it becomes that delicious filling. And then you have it sandwiched on top with your sponge, and that very thin layer of raspberry just adds another dimension. And just before I finish this, as I said, I can actually feel where it's thicker. And what's a little handy tip as well is using an acrylic rolling pin and just roll it there, Colette. Keep rolling. And there you have our layer ready for the next sponge layer. Now the sponge, the second sponge that's going on top, again, I put a tiny bit of jam, exactly the same as I did with the bottom, inverted it on top. So we now have a Russian log sandwich. So the most important thing is now we need to weigh it down. So we're going to put some parchment paper again on top, and that's protecting the sponge, because as it's been weighed down, what I don't want is if you put a tin directly onto the sponge, the tin crumb will end up on your tin. So find something equivalent with about a 1 kg in weight. So we need two kgs. So that is going to be weighed down in the fridge for about 4 to 5 hours. So the weight will evenly distribute within your Russian log. It'll be much easier to cut and you'll have a lovely even layer. Now, the finishing touch to our Russian log is fondant. This is the traditional icing, traditional icing that we would use for the Russian log or tipsy cake. It comes in a big bucket. It's a commercial fondant. I need to melt it in a pot with a tiny bit of food colouring to get that lovely knickers pink that you associate with the Russian log. If you don't have fondant, you can use sugar paste, tiny bit of water, and heat and render it down to the same consistency as your fondant we're using for the Russian log. Now, before you add the colour, you can see how stiff this fondant is. It's completely white, and basically what I'm doing is I'm melting it very slowly so that we will have a lovely pouring consistency before I add the colour. Now, it takes a couple of minutes, but I'll show you the end result in a few minutes. In goes a tiny toothpick of colour. And stir. Look at the difference in the consistency. You have that beautiful pouring consistency ready for the Russian log. Now I have got my Russian log. It has been chilling in the fridge overnight. So this is the magic of a Russian log. So I'm going to put a chopping board up over it and invert it, because now the top becomes the bottom and the bottom becomes the top. And we have got a lovely flat top for our fondant icing. And I'm just, oh, how satisfying that is to peel it off. We have prepared our fondant. It is a lovely knickers pink. And this is going on to, now listen, do not panic if this goes over, sides, dribbles onto your countertop, you name it. All I'm doing is trying to get to the corners first before I use my palette knife to smooth it out. Now I have used about 800 grams of my fondant to give this delicious Russian log a lovely thick finish. And again, as I said, the reason for heating this up is you have a lovely sheen or shine with your Russian log. Put that to the side. I'm using I have to use my in denial glasses. On they go, just to bring it to the edge. Now, for all of ye who do make Russian logs, ye all know the chef's treat, which is the corners. So although I'm brushing it to the sides, I'm not really bothered that it's dribbling down, because they will be cut with trimmings. I've melted 100 grams of Belgian chocolate, and I'm just taking a snip. I put it into a green bag, just because with the green bag against my white jacket, it's much easier to see. This is 100 grams of melted dark chocolate. I like the contrast of the dark chocolate against the vibrant pink. And of course, that lovely signature feathered icing. So you've got a lovely thick, oh, we might finish up the top here. Wiggle, wiggle. And while it's still wet, we're just going to drag that signature finish to the Russian log, going all the way down to the end. I have the best memories of having Thompson's Russian log and chocolate slices as a kid. And to be able to rekindle this amazing recipe is just a joy. Feathered icing Russian log. I will leave it set. We'll cut it up and look at its glory. Now here we are back with our beautiful chilled Russian log, our tipsy cake. And as you can see, I need my in and out glasses because I'm going to cut it. Now it's been chilled. I have to go up on my tippy toes because I'm 5 foot splat. And these are the cut-offs I need to cut to give a lovely clean cut. So wipe the knife every time. This is our chef's treat. Move. And again, all I'm doing is cutting the trim. As I said, the best part, chef's treat. Yum! Give it a wipe. Rotate. Make sure it's on the chopping board, just because it makes life that little bit easier. And last but not least, again, position it on your cake board. Wipe your knife clean to get a nice clean cut. And all I'm doing is I'm just cutting off the excess trim. And now I just mark it. So I'll cut, and I'll see you in a few minutes with delicious slices. So make sure your knife is nice and clean. And then again, all I'm doing now is slicing right down. I mean, technically that would be perfect for one slice with a cup of tea. Doink. Turning it this way because I'm just going to show you once I cut how amazing the Russian log looks. Now there is eating and drinking in this Russian log. It's absolutely divine. I'm going to cut some more slices. Guess what I'm having for my cup of tea? Thanks for watching. See you soon.